Hi, my name is Sibelley. Most people know me as Sibelley, and this is my first class teaching at Corning, which I'm really excited about. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to demo midway through a piece, just because my process is so long, and I wanted you to see some of the detail work that I get into. So right now, you'll see it in a moment. I'm joining a jaguar with a figure, and they're all hollow, and they're going to be hollow connected. And so I'll show you mid-process going through a figure, and I guess let's get started. There we go. Okay. Get my blow hose ready. So actually, before I begin, I'll just show the two parts that I'm working on. So I have the jaguar here, and then I have the figure that's going with it. And at the moment, I'm thinking about having her coming up against the jaguar and connecting her back to his belly. So before I connect them, I'm going to finish her. So most of this demo will probably be focused on this piece and not so much this one, but we'll see how far we get. Okay. So right now I'm in the perfect position to change the handle to the bottom of the feet so I can focus on the top part of the body. So I'm going to open a hole on the bottom of her foot. And everything I do is totally hollow. So I'll work up until the toes. Everything is hollow, so I have a chance to manipulate it all the way through if I need to. But it really depends on what I'm using the piece for. Okay, and then I'll put her away while I prep the tube. We're going to open this one up. I'm going to make sure this hole is pretty small so it matches the foot. And I'm going to plug this one. And so I'm going to do a hollow attachment here, heating up both sides equally. Push them together, and then pull and blow. And I'm going to want this tube to be centered with her body, so I'm going to pull it out and move it between her feet. I'm going to double check this seal and make sure it's stable. Okay, now I'll remove the other handle. And I'm going to straighten this a little bit. Okay, now we're ready to go. I'm going to take some excess glass off the top. This was just left over from the previous handle. And then I'm going to shape her chest area. So if you think about anatomy, our chests are pretty flat up here. They're not totally rounded. So I need to kind of flatten the chest plate before I add her breasts. I'm blowing and pushing into the paddle. I'm checking all the angles. Before I get into the detailed work, I like to make sure that the overall shape is constructed. So it's much easier to handle the details without having to go back and change the shape of the piece. I'm also going to bring her back in. I'll make my flame a little bit smaller, so I'm going to do some carving. So I'll carve in her belly button. Give her some definition on her waist. Okay. And then I'll pull her spine up the back. And then I'm going to use this technique called tubulation. So basically I'm going to add hot glass on a rod to the surface, which will be a little bit preheated. And then I'll pull the glass out and blow at the same time, and so it'll give it an external hollow vessel, which will be the breasts. So I'm going to heat this, and as I'm heating the rod closer to the flame, I'm preheating the body in the background. So just watching both pieces, making sure one doesn't get too hot. And I'll tuck it and then pull and blow. And then I'll go back in. And what I'm looking at is finding a consistent wall weight. So I might melt it back in a little bit and then blow it out. And before I get too focused on shaping one, I'm going to add the other one, and then I'll go back and forth just to make sure that they're matching. Okay. And just as before, I'm going to melt it back in a little bit and blow it out. Check in from the top. So now I'm going to focus on making sure that they're symmetrical at least somewhat. I'm always checking from this angle because it gives me the opportunity to see if they're both the same shape. Because from the front they might appear that way, but then when you look at it from this way, it might change the view. So I see that this one has a bit more glass, so I'm going to remove a little bit. And then another thing I pay attention to is making sure the transition from the chest into it is smooth instead of it going abruptly up. So I'm going to heat that transition and let the glass fall into the shape with some small puffs. And then give it a little bit of volume on the underside. Okay. So you can kind of see the difference between the right and the left. So I'll do the same thing on the left side. Then add some volume on the bottom. Check the top. Okay, I feel like these are almost ready. And I really like to use gravity and the heat and just glass and the breath to shape the pieces. I feel that using minimal tools will allow the glass to be a little bit more natural. And so sometimes if I want the glass to come in, I'll just heat it and then lean it in a way where gravity pulls the glass down, so I don't have to take a tool or push it in, which might not give it that natural pull. So, and then I'll add her nipples. So I'll just pull this out. And then I'll make sure that the tip of the rod is more hot than the breast, and I'll just tack it and then pull. And then the other one. Make sure that's good. Nice. I know. Hey. They're full. She's fertile. And so now I'm checking her anatomy and I'm thinking she probably needs a little bit more of an hourglass shape. So I'm gonna blow out part of her back instead of because there are muscles here that we need to not ignore. So I'm going to focus my heat right on her back, like back side. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of a blowout.
Are you going to put both of her arms on the jaguar, or like one on the knee and one on the jaguar?
Ooh, that's a good question. I will look at her with the jaguar and then give you a firm answer. It would be cool to see one arm free and then one arm on the jaguar.
Yeah. I think it would be like a natural pose to think if she's like, you know, like.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice power stance too. Okay. Ooh. Yeah, I think that I might have one of her hands on her leg. So that'll be cool to show you also. Okay, so before I do the arms, I'm going to make the head. And I always do the head first because for instance, if I have the arms up high and then I try and sculpt the head between the arms, it's really hard to like get in there. And because the arms tend to be so small, you really don't want to have to go back and resculpt those if they get hot. So I'm going to pop the hole for where I'm going to put the neck. Okay, and I'll put her away while I prep the head. And with my process, I'll never sculpt a part of the body fully before I attach it to the body, just because it ensures that the piece stays proportional. Like if I spent a lot of time sculpting the head and then realized it was too big, then it's just a huge waste of time. So I'd rather just sculpt the head on the piece, and that way I can check it as I'm working on it to make sure that it makes sense. Oh, this is kind of dirty. Okay. So for the head, the neck is going to be the lowest part, and then I'll puff out part of this section, just a general shape of the head. So I'm not worried about this being a perfect sphere because our heads aren't perfect spheres. I'm just trying to puff out for volume. Okay. So I'm going to pull the neck down just a little bit. I never want to leave the stock tubing. Even if it's around the same size as what I need, I'll still want to pull it out and kind of puff it so that the wall thickness isn't as thick. Okay. I'm gonna check. Okay, so I see this is a really long neck, so I'm going to take some material off. So I'll just peel it off with another piece of glass. There we go. And then because I'm going to rip the handle off here, I'm just going to plug this one. Okay. Nice. And this, yeah, this works. Okay, and then I'll go in on the sides where it needs a little bit more heat, and I'll barely touch it, just enough to get the inner seam, and then puff. Okay, and then I'll let this side cool, so I'm going to go to the other side of the neck. Here we go. Puff, puff. And everything I do is small heat, puff, puff, small heat, puff, puff. Nothing is ever a big, harsh blow or a large amount of heat. So even if the pieces get big, I don't necessarily need a lot of flame power. So I'm going to remove this now that the neck is stable. And I'm planning on this character being more like a cat, so her face isn't necessarily going to be like a human skull. It's going to be a little bit anamorphic. Yay. So the process of shaping the skull is pretty intuitive. Like as the glass moves, I'll just check it, make sure it makes sense, find a spot that doesn't, and then I'll just manipulate that. So I see there's like a little bit of a thick spot on top, and I'll just go ahead and remove that. And when you have a point like this, I like to go around it instead of directly on it, and then blow. And that way, it won't create another lens. Okay, so I'm going to give her back of the skull some shape. Let it fall back a little bit. And it really matters what direction I'm holding the glass while I'm heating it, because if I'm holding it sideways and I'm heating it this way, the glass is going to want to go this way. So it'll develop a thick spot. So I would rather, if I'm heating the glass, I'd want it to come down evenly. So it really depends on where you want the glass to move, but the direction that you're holding it while it's getting hot really makes a huge difference. Okay, so now I'm going to press the sides of the face. And I'm just doing spot heating really lightly. And down. And then now I'm going to pull the chin out. And as I get more detailed, I'm going to want to make my flame smaller so I have more control. So I'm focusing the heat where on the chin area. And before I start using the rod, I'm going to blow the shape into as much of the shape that I want as possible. You want to be really careful with the optics. So if the chin has a thick spot, then it might translate as like facial hair or something. So you want to make sure that the wall weight stays even throughout the jaw to the chin. Okay. And then I'll pull out her nose area. Okay. She's looking good. Then next I'll carve in her eyes. So I'll take my tweezers because they're symmetrical, and then I'll press in both at the same time with both of them. And when I do that, it creates like a natural pocket where the brow line would be. A little bit of duvet. Cute. Yeah. Okay. And then next, I'm going to push in the sides of the nose. So let's get even smaller here. Cool. Okay. Cute. Hi. And yeah, that's looking nice. And then I'll add a little bit of definition to the nose, so I might push it up. Okay. And then for the lips, I'm just going to put a tiny dab of glass and then put a seam line right in the middle with this. So I'll pull this out a little bit smaller. And I'm always looking at the face from the front so I know I'm centered. Okay. Then we'll cut our seam. Mm-hmm. And then I might pull the edges of the mouth out. So I'm getting it just hot enough to move. I barely want to see a glow. And then using the cold rod to pull the material. Okay. And then I'll go back in and press those sides down. And this is where you can give them a little bit of expression. Like maybe she's smiling. You have to be very careful when you're doing something like this, because as soon as you put too much heat in, the detail just disappears immediately. So you might have to go over the lips a few times. But yeah.
Looks great.
Thanks.
Love those little lips.
Little lips. And so now I'm going to go back into the eyes and give her a little bit of life. So I have this handy tool. It's just a tube, brass tube, but it's perfect for pushing in the sockets.
I think it's funny that like every artist I feel like has their little tool that does like that.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm not going to do much.
That's just like rivet stop for.
Is it?
Yeah,
So since I've already carved the line in for her eye, I'm going to push this part right under that line, because when I push in, that line will act as sort of like the eye, the cover of the eye. And then I'll blow out a little bit. And since she's kind of a cat girl, I'm going to give her a little bit more flair on the eyes. Ooh, she's so cute. Okay, and then I'm just gonna give her little brows. So I'll pull out my rod a little bit. And I'll let that just melt in all the way. Still leaves a little bit of an impression. Whoop. There we go. And I'll take my knife. And I'll carve in here. And the eyebrows can really give the, add to the expression of the piece. So if I want to make her a little bit more angry, I can lean the eyebrows down. She can be sad. But I think I want to give her more of a determined look. So I'm going to lean them down just a little bit. Okay. Woo. I mean, the hardest part about this is making it symmetrical, so I always try my best. So I'm going to give her a little more lift. The cool thing about using the X-Acto is that you get a second chance. Like if you lay an eyebrow down the wrong way, you can always push it, move it where you want. And then now I'll give her some pupils. Oh, hold on. Gotta put this away. She had a little crack. So she ended up developing a little crack from the lip, and I think I just left it out too long, so now we can fix a crack. So whenever something cracks, which always happens, I'll just put it in the kiln and let it sit there for a moment, and then I'll bring it out into my annealing flame. And sometimes the crack just disappears, and if it doesn't, then I'll just try and keep it warm and work through it. But this one seems like it's manageable. But in the meantime, I can mess a little bit more with the jaguar's head, actually.
If you do run into a situation where that happens and it cracks and like you can't fix it, do you just like rip it off and put a new head on?
Yeah, I haven't had to do that yet, but if it does, like if you have a really thick head and then it's like covered in hair and stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it is better to just start over. It does get to a point where you end up working the glass so much that it just doesn't look nice anymore. Okay, so I think I'm gonna move his body just like a little bit because I want him to be looking back more. So I'm just going to heat all the way around his body and like bring him in. And I might just have gravity do it for me, but we'll see. Mm-mm. And then I'll move his head a little bit too. Change his gesture a little bit. When I want to move parts like this without disrupting the sculpting too much, it's great to just have like a soft heat going all around, making sure that the glass doesn't get too glowing hot, and then just guiding it little by little. Yeah. And so I'll smooth this out. Got a little fold here, and sometimes it's natural, it looks kind of nice. So I might not melt it in all the way, but the cool thing about the way glass moves naturally is that sometimes it just gives the form that you need for an object like this. So, okay, I'm happy with that. Now let's see about this lady. So I'm going to set up Huh? It's on the jaw. Yeah, it's disappearing. Oh, whoops. Yes, we're good to go. So I saw that it came from the edge of the lip, which I think was just like a cold seal. And that tends to happen. It's like the usual point where it'll crack from. But that was just from leaving it out too long. But I think we're good. So I'll just slowly bring more oxygen into the flame, give it more heat now that it's stable. And pretty much almost healed. And I just want to be careful with the face because I don't want to lose the detail that I've already spent so much time working on. So staying far away, using the softest part of the flame. And making sure I get it all. You definitely want to make sure you heal a crack all the way through because if you don't, it'll just keep cracking. And then I'm going to get my hand torch in a moment and go into the lip. Thank you. Okay. Guess this is really good for you guys to see, huh?
Definitely.
Are you just kind of getting rid of the crease in between like the added lips and the face?
Yeah, and I'm trying to find the root of the crack.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I'd say that's the most important part to address. Because I've had pieces where I didn't fully heal the crack from where it started, and then it just keeps cracking from that point.
Yeah, because it's your problem area.
So yeah, I'm really happy that I didn't lose any shape in the face, so that was probably like the best case scenario type of crack. But definitely as soon as I realize something's cracked, I put it immediately in the kiln. I don't freak out or mess with it. And then as long as you let it soak the heat and then bring it into the annealing flame, then more likely you'll be fine. Most likely you'll be fine. So. Okay, we're good to go. And after I heal a crack, I'll put her back in the kiln again just to make sure everything's even. So we'll do that. And then, let's see. Oh, I can keep working on the jaguar's face too. Okay. So I haven't given him any pupils yet, so I'll keep working on his eyes. This is like one big face demo, right? So I don't know if you can see his face, but he's pretty much almost there. I made one of his ears kind of like going back because I feel like sometimes cats will be like checking their sounds, so I think it's kind of cute that his one ear is going that way. So I'm going to use my handy tool. Actually, I have another one that's just a little bit bigger. Oh, shoot.
Is it just a brass pipe?
They're like
Oh, sorry.
a little brass pipe. They're made for like making rivets.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Whose phone is that?
You could probably even find them at like a micro.
Oh no. All right, sorry. Okay, I can't find it, it's okay. We'll be fine. I had another one that's like a half circle and it works really well with the cat eyes.
Oh, I bet.
So we'll just make do with what we have. So just like the human face, I'm just gonna go under and push in this way. See how much that changed it? And you know, once that circular part is pressed in, it gives more of a platform to put the pupil. Okay. And then I kind of melted this too much, so we'll go back. There we go. Awesome. Then we give him some of that cat eye flare. Woo, woo. Okay, people time. With these, I like to make the part of the pupil hot, and then just the act of it touching the eye socket will fuse it because it's so small.
So you're heating the cat more than the string.
Opposite.
Opposite.
Mm-hmm. So, oh. If it tags somewhere, just like be patient, let it cool, and then it'll snap off. So, you gotta have a stabilizing arm. Got it. Whew.
No coffee before people come.
Wow. Yeah, we'll go in with the hand torch just to be sure. These can also be problematic points if you don't, like you want to keep it cylindrical, but you don't want it to be a cold seal. So you kind of have to figure out a way to heat it enough where it doesn't melt in completely. So I'll just go in and out. And I think if the pupil is small enough, I'll be able to go with that brass tube, and sometimes it's able to like frame the pupil,
Nice. Yeah.
and then it pushes in the glass. It works better with my half circle. Where is it? And I really like to put, you know, a luster on the eyes just so they pop out if I'm not using a color. Cool. Okay.
Did you make that off the 25 mil or did you use the larger thing?
This one?
The body.
Oh, the body? I think I used 31 mil, the 31. Back to the face. So her chin kind of came in when we were fixing the crack, so I'm just gonna blow out her chin more. Ah. There we go. Okay. And then I'm gonna give her some ears. So I think I want her to be more like a house cat. So the ears, I'm gonna just build off her head. So I'm gonna make sure the rod is a little bit hotter than her head because her head isn't the thickest piece of glass. So we'll just run this down here, and then I'll just gather the glass. Heat it up. Have my flat tweezers ready. And it's okay if this balls up on itself because I'm gonna bring it back out. What matters more is that it's fully fused. Okay. And before I finish the shape on this one, I'm going to add the other ear. So she kind of has bare ears right now. What? Okay. I always check the top of the head just to make sure they're in line. Ooh, cutie! I know, she kind of looks cute with the round ears, right? It makes me think of the cheetah girl from Thundercats. Okay. Chitara, yeah. Okay, but I still want to give her pointy ears, so let's see. Okay. And I'll even paddle the ends so that they're straight. Check it from the front. Straighten them out. And then I might even push him back, give her a little bit of a submissive look. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Yeah. Like it. I'm gonna blow out the back of her head a little bit because it came in. Always gotta check. Okay. The detail stuff takes so long, but it's worth it. What do you think?
It's awesome.
Thanks. Okay, cool. Whee! She's so cute. Okay, so I'll put her away. Her head is a little bit big, but it's okay. She's a cat. Okay, so I think I'm gonna prepare her arms. So I'm gonna pull down some tubing for that.
Do you do those the same way that you did the legs, like not a tubulation, like an attached pull down tube?
Attached, yeah.
Cool.
I like to do that with the arms just because they're so long.
Yeah.
And then it just, it actually takes longer to figure out the tubulation with those.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'll attach.
Another boot.
Yeah, I got it though. I got it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. You got the coolest students. Okay. All right, we're pulling down the arms. So I'm going to have one of her arms coming out like this on her leg. So what I'm going to do for that is I'll actually sculpt her hand on the leg, and then I'll just attach the arm to the hand.
Okay.
Which is a little bit tricky. So I'm going to do the arm in two parts, and I'll have one arm coming up from the hand and one arm coming from the shoulder, and then I'll hollow attach them at the elbow.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool
You
solution.
do a little Jesus seal right there?
I don't know how to do a Jesus seal, but I do something like that.
Cool. If it works, it works.
Yeah. I know, I actually probably should know how to do that because I hang out with Micah so much.
Another boot.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I know you have as many as last week.
I know. I'm not going to use any of them.
It's all right. Just start switching them out in the middle of the piece, you know?
All right, boot switch.
Like a pit stop.
So I'm already starting to think about how the arm is going to come out of her shoulder. And so depending on if the arm is at, like whatever angle it's at, I'll angle the hole on the tube so that you don't have to deal with like folding. And so I'm thinking if her arm is coming out this way, then I might have the slightest angle on this tube.
So you don't get like too much material kind of in the armpit area.
Because that is the
That's
worst.
the worst. Yeah.
So I'm just blowing this out to even it. And then I'll pop the hole kind of on the side. Yeah, and because this figure is so small, everything gets more and more delicate.
Yeah.
So the risk is a little bit greater. Well, as far as losing detail goes, so. Okay. I'm also going to pop the hole on her arm. Okay, so yeah, so you see how this is coming out now?
Yeah.
And it kind of gives her a little bit of shoulder too.
Is her right arm or her left arm?
Her left arm.
Her left arm's on the cat, right? She's like this.
Her right arm's on the cat.
If her right arm's on the cat, it's going to be on the cat's booty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, now you guys confused me. Hold on. Let's reevaluate
Is she
this.
touching his butt or his head?
I thought she was touching his butt.
She can touch either.
Yeah.
You know, because she's just like, good cat.
Yeah.
Okay,
You need his butt.
because I feel like there's more room for her to put her arm on his butt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you won't be covering up the details of the head by having your arm in the way.
right?
Yeah.
I also think I need to give her a little bit of a head tilt too, so she's kind of like, but we'll get to that later. All right, left arm. Ooh. Stay. All right, let's pop that hole. When I'm opening the hole, I'm making sure that I'm digging out the seam so that it doesn't fold on itself, because we want it to be as thin as it can be. Okay, that's good. Oh, so cute. All right, so I'm gonna attach it here, and I'm thinking, yeah. It's a little further back. And I'm trying to be as attentive as possible not to splash the flame on the face or the other parts, because now it's getting to a point where, you know, other things are getting cool and it'll just start cracking if you're running hot flame all over. So trying to do things like this. Whoa, weird pose. Okay. I got our handy torch.
This is similar to when you put like the head of the jaguar on the body, right? You're just kind of working your way slowly around the seam. It's just on a smaller scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like technically you should never have to bridge if you do it this way.
Yeah, because you have like the other 5/6 of the seal supporting.
Exactly. And if you're running the flame along the glass and not through the glass, then you never have to worry about the other side getting hot.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, huh?
The flame like wrap around and make it glass like that.
Boom. Now it's fully sealed. Easy peasy. Now I'm just gonna buff this out a little bit. And again, like until I have the full arm on, I'm not gonna worry too much about sculpting the fine details. But I'm gonna kind of prep this here. Okay. So she's Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is sculpt the hand on her leg. So I'll let her heat up before I do that. And in the meantime, I'll pull more arm tubing. Are we off time?
Got a few more minutes.
Okay.
I like this last one last night. You're way over.
Oh yeah. That was so funny.
That was so funny.
I feel like mine were too fast actually, now that I think about it.
Yours were just right.
I guess it made up for that.
Yeah.
You didn't have to snooze any alarms.
Okay, it was so funny though because my alarm to check the pressure on my oxygen tank went off in the middle of and it was like at the same time as his timer went off, so it was almost like a second timer. Since it's the forearm, I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller. So excited. Now I'm thinking I might actually make it a hollow connection into the leg and then sculpt the fingers around it.
Okay.
So, so that, for instance, if it was functional, then there's like more areas for the water to travel through. Or
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to see that.
yeah. Okay, let's do it. Yeah. This is when it gets kind of like techie and brainy, and you're just like, oh.
I was thinking about doing like a larger one for like a bus with like a more arch in the back, and then like her hands can come down to her butt, and I could like recycle water down through the shoulders to the arms.
Okay, let's poke a hole in her thigh. Okay, her hand, we have to make sure we get this right. Her arm is coming this way. Yeah, so her hand is going to be mostly on the top of her thigh, so the wrist is really going to come into the edge here.
It's a little easier.
Oh, my nail. I feel like I started to see it melt in. I was like, oh.
The real secret of how you get all the gold on this melting your nails onto the glass while it's hot.
Good thing they're gels. Okay, let's see. I get nervous because if I get this hole in the wrong place and the arm ends up being too long, and then it's really hard to fix it. But I could also just move the joint, you know, depending.
At the shoulder joint with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Whee! Let's go. So I think that seal turned out pretty great, but just in case, I'll go back in. Yes. No lines here. All right, we got a good seal. And then I'm actually right now going to pull out the shape of the from the wrist to the forearm. So trying to avoid splashing. Okay. Then take some of that excess off. Okay, so now I'm prepping them to be attached. And I'll probably pull more material off this one because I want it to come under the arm. Okay. Then I'll pull some off of this one. And then I'm going to pop a hole in this one and I'll pick the hole off that one. So I'm going to blow this out a little bit so it's thinner. So it's easy to open. And then I'll pop a hole in this one. Oh, go open there. There we go. Okay. So what I end up doing is I actually draw in the glass.
Gotcha. Like a little 3D printer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ooh, that's kind of cool looking, huh? Okay. Now we'll bring her arm down into position. And even though it's nice to have like a really tight gap, since this is so stable, like I don't mind drawing it in more.
Yeah.
So I'll still pull up on this piece and just kind of like attach it. Well, not like that. Or I'll pull down on this one because there's more. There's more to share. And then, yeah, we'll just start, let's start drawing.
So you like hold them together and now you're like to fill it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
like kind of messy about it, but you know, I'm looking forward to blowing the shape back out. So I'm not too worried at the moment. And sometimes I'll even take the tungsten and I'll push the glass around with it. So if there's like a tight gap that I don't want to put a hot rod in, then if it's close enough, I'll just push the glass together. And now we just have a little hole. Enough material here. Push it. Check my air pressure. And we are clear.
Super heavy.
Oh, look at that. She's pretty well proportioned.
That looks great.
And then the extra glass I can just pull out. Okay. And then carving in here. Awesome. Yeah, and then now we can just add the hand and then that's it. Thanks, guys. Let's put her away. That's
You
pretty
gotta
sweet.
Draw the fingers on?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in.